people used to say, oh, well, we treated all our children the same way.
No.
And it's like, no, you didn't. You didn't even get close to treating them the same way.
And that's the point. If you grew up in a family that you had the same parents, if they didn't divorce, you don't get treated the same.
No.
Every child has a very different experience. I mean, the eldest child for every parent is basically an experiment, right?
Yep.
I mean, nobody knows what the hell they're doing. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Soberful podcast. I'm Veronica.
And I am Chip.
I think we're at the point where we don't need last names.
We're not using surnames any longer.
Well
okay, we're that well known. Okay, right. Okay.
Yeah. So,
like
we're
Prince, like Prince.
Beyonce and
Yeah. Okay, yeah. I get it. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, okay.
So we are into 2023.
Oh, yes, we are. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which
so
I just, the older we get, the faster it goes, it feels like.
Yeah.
Doesn't it? So today we're going to be talking about birth order and why it matters. And I was thinking the other day, I wanted to do a podcast on this. And I thought, actually, I can't believe we haven't done a podcast on this because we've covered so many subjects. And it's really fascinating. Birth order really matters. And we're going to obviously talk about why birth order matters if you are, how that, affects you and why it's relevant to sobriety. Before we just get into that, I want you guys to know that at the end of the month, I'm doing a fabulous new free training that I haven't done before. It's called the Sobriety Habit. It's about how to build a sobriety habit. I'm really excited about it. I've been planning it for a year. You don't want to miss this one. It's free. Go to soberful.com, sign up there, and you'll get all of the information. Okay, so first of all, birth order. What birth order are you, Chip? Where are you in the lineup?
I'm third, but I'm third of four, but I would not be wanting to use my family as the template for birth order because it is so dysfunctional and so peculiar. But nevertheless, the order in which I was born did have a profound impact on my life. I have an eldest brother who was 6 years older than me. I have an elder brother who was 2 years older than me. And then I came along. My elder brother had severe mental health problems. So to the extent that he occupied all of everybody's attention, and providing I was quiet and in the corner or else staying away with my grandparents, which I did a lot of in my very, very early formative years, then that was all right because he was such hard work. So I was completely sort of ignored in the corner, keep quiet, be quiet, or go away to your grandparents. Then he got put into a secure unit, and I came back into the family threshold, I suppose, although not really being aware of it, thinking, okay, now this is my time, but I definitely didn't have that thought process at the time, to then 6 months later be packed off to boarding school unknowingly. And that didn't work very well. That didn't help much. And then my younger brother came along who was 10 years younger than me, and he did get treated profoundly differently to any of the others previously because he wasn't part of that very chaotic kind of children routine that my parents had to deal with before. So there was a real mix-up instinct. But I think the predominant thing for me was because my elder brother was so demanding, I got ignored, for want of a better word, yeah.
So that's what's really interesting about birth order is there's lots of variables. So, there's the classic oldest child, middle child, and youngest child. But then there's lots of variables. There's the variables of having a sibling that's very ill, that takes up a lot of attention. There's big gaps. So I would guess your younger brother that came along 10 years after, even though he was the youngest of four, probably had a lot of only child.
Completely. He got treated completely differently. It was almost as if my parents went, well, we'll try and get it right. They had a completely different relationship. They talked together. They went on holidays together. They had their own little language they spoke together. and this is my parents and my younger brother.
Yeah.
They had a whole little, and I was really aware that it was very different to the way I was born. So yes, I think he did have what would be, because 10 years is a long time between children.
Yeah.
It's
It
like
is a
when
big
he's
gap.
10, I'm 20. It's like I've gone. It's a big gap. And also nowadays, another factor that has to be come in, because I'm aware that a lot of the research about birth order was done, it's been done sometime. We're looking at a time now where 50% of marriages fail. So then you have to throw into the melting pot step parenting, children being passed between parenting
Yeah.
homes and things like that also has to be played into the equation.
Yeah.
But yes, I think, without doubt, there are differences in the way that people are affected by the order in which they're born. And I also think that there's been, with the advance of sort of therapy and the way that things get researched and developed, that old sort of adage, people used to say, oh, well, we treated all our children the same way.
No.
And it's like, no, you didn't.
No.
You didn't even get close to treating them
Yeah.
the same way.
And that's the point, is that, if you grew up in a family that you had the same parents, if they didn't divorce, you don't get treated the same.
No.
Every child has a very different experience. I mean, the eldest child for every parent is basically an experiment, right?
Yep.
I mean, nobody knows what the hell they're doing. There's such a massive difference between, I have two. I'm an only child. And when I was researching this, I am a very classic only child. I have all the traits, and I grew up with a single mother with mental health problems. So I have all the traits of only children. So let me go over some of those for those of you who are only children. So we never had to compete for resources or attention, which is good and bad, because all of the attention is on you.
Yeah.
And you're special. So one thing that I recognize very much as being an only child is not sharing very well. I don't touch my stuff ever. I'm much better at that. But I remember being a teenager and going on vacation with my girlfriends, and I bought this really nice shampoo and conditioner because it was vacation, and I just wanted a nice shampoo and conditioner. And I left it in the shower, and a couple of days later, it was pretty much gone, and I was horrified. Like, horrified. I couldn't believe that people would use my shampoo and conditioner. It was such a shock to me. It was like I was deeply shocked. And I had this kind of awareness that it wasn't a big deal. Like, I was kind of like, this is like when you have brothers and sisters, I think this is what happens. So I had to get used to that. So the reason why I want to say this is all relevant to sobriety, it's about how we deal with other people. We deal with other people from our experience in our families, and that affects the connections we make and the friendships we make. So I kind of knew, like, I was inside, I was fuming, and outside I was like, yeah, that's fine. But I was not okay with it. The other thing two other things that are very only children, big readers. Because I don't know if that's so true from a much younger generation because of screens, but I know from older generations, you just spend a lot of time on your own. And I've always been a big reader, and most only children I meet are usually big readers, and I want to say that saved my life, reading. But finding escape in books and answers in books saved my life.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I still hate is being teased. I don't like being teased. I hate it. I just hate it. And I had a boyfriend, I've had boyfriends in the past that one of their ways of communicating is teasing, and I just tense up because I hate it. Because I feel like I'm on quicksand. Like I know you're not being serious, but I don't know which bit isn't serious. And I know there's a joke, but I don't know where the joke is. And I'm scared I'm going to look stupid. It just makes me feel anxious. I hate being teased.
No, I'm not a fan of teasing anyway. I think it's passive bullying, but I'm not a great fan of it. Sometimes, I know certain couples and friendships get into a kind of routine, for what you might call male banter. It happens with all genders, But I'm not that great about it, actually. But I was just thinking, I have brought up in many ways two only children. My daughter, while I was using, and my son when I was in recovery. And again, it's like, as you were saying, it's about how you brought up. Because my daughter, I think if you're an only child and you're in a dysfunctional home like you were with your mother and
Yeah.
everything like that, like my daughter was with her parents, you feel it much more strongly because you've got nobody to share it with, nobody to kind
Yes.
of be your ally, support.
Yeah.
How many times have we heard, brothers and sisters being protective of each other in a
Yeah.
dysfunctional situation? If you're an only child, you haven't got that. You lose that protection. You've got to suffer everything on your own, or reap the benefits all on your own. If it's a nice functioning household, so I think only children is. I'm beginning to wonder whether that thing about, there used to be an old thing about only children, they're always very spoiled and they're always very demanding. There was a rather negative thing about the way only children, if you have only children, they'll be
Yeah.
brought up, they won't be very good people because they'll be demanding and spoiled and all those
Yeah.
things. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think a lot depends on how the child is brought up. I'm not sure. I think that's a bit of that kind of old Victorian parenting, and I don't believe that that's necessarily the case. I think you can have an only child. I'm using my son as an example. Give him the correct amount of, an appropriate amount of love, attention, and security, and they'll do fine. I think you could have an only child without any doubt at all, and they could end up feeling. You could end up spoiling them because they're so special. Again, IVF has made a big difference to the way people. There's so many factors that contribute towards the way parents interact with children that have changed, I think, since the early research into child order was first sort of given consideration, and how it's changing all the time.
Yeah, I think if you're parenting an only child, I agree. I desperately wanted a sibling, desperately, for that very reason. I wanted a sibling so badly to share the burden of being in my home.
Yeah.
And I think if you're parenting an only child, there's a lot you can be aware of.
Yes.
In terms of, because I feel like that. So I'm parenting two boys, and I was doing this research, and I'm like, oh my God, I have a classic eldest and a classic youngest.
Yeah.
Because the eldest one, and I've had my first child at 38, and I was, like if he fell over, I was like, oh honey, oh sweet, oh you okay?
Yeah.
So my eldest now at 11, if he has a little bump, he's like, ah! Whereas my youngest, because when you have a second one, you don't have as much time, is as tough as nails. Like if my youngest falls over and cries, he's really hurt. Whereas younger brothers they're pretty hardcore. And I can see it was my parenting that has done that.
Yeah.
I was too much, fussing over my eldest. And there's a Glennon Doyle. I don't know if you've heard of her. This makes me laugh. She wrote a book that was very successful called Untamed, and she talks about, she's a mother of 3, and she said, she went through all of that. She said, by the time I had my third, I was so exhausted, I just gave her the iPad and wished her luck. That's so true.
Yeah.
It's like the youngest ones get away with so much more, and then the oldest ones can feel resentful. Did you feel resentful of your much younger brother? Did you feel
very,
like, why did
very
what
no
did you
think
did you make an interpretation like, what's wrong with me that he was loved and cherished?
Absolutely.
And I wasn't?
Absolutely. And I could tell at an early, and by the time he was, say, 5 or 6, which would have made me 15, 16, I was definitely aware of the different dynamic. It wasn't as if I learned that since I trained and everything. I knew that. I thought, no, you 3 have got a completely different dynamic to me. I'm not part of that family unit at all. I'm some sort of odd add-on that you don't quite know what to do with. Everything is about this is changing so quickly because, you just mentioned an iPad, which is we now have a whole new generation who are growing up completely differently to the way that
Yeah.
you or I grew up. The whole dynamic
Yeah.
of families has changed beyond and out of recognition, because we now have
Mm.
anybody under 17, anybody under 18 now has only known iPad, iPhone interactions. They have only known that. They don't know
Yeah.
any other way of communicating. That's the only tool they've had, and I think it's beginning to have an impact. So I absolutely get that kind of birth order is very important, and it has made a big difference in a lot of people's lives. But I just think it's such a fluid thing that's changing all the time. I think that there was definitely as we've said, there was definitely a sort of feeling that if you were an only child, you were somehow behind the whatever. As opposed to people who grew up with siblings and things like that, there was a sort of slightly negative connotation as such attached to only children. I think that's changed,
Yeah.
but I do think it's really interesting the way in which, as you said, the first child is an experiment. No parent is prepared for what a child is like, and it affects the dynamic of the relationship, and it affects so many things. And I think. It isn't, as you quite rightly say, it's an experiment. By the time you got the second one, you're more relaxed, so you're going to have a different attitude to it. And
Yeah.
some people go on and on and on and on and have very, very many children, which, quite frankly, I don't know how they cope with, but they do. But yeah, but every child has a different experience.
Yes, every habit and the order that they're born in is a big part of that. So let's talk about firstborns.
Okay.
So we've said that firstborns are often the experiment, and younger siblings will get away with behavior that they never could, which sometimes can breed resentment.
Yep.
Some typical kind of characteristics of firstborns: they can be very responsible, they can be perfectionists, list makers, well organized, hard driving, natural leaders, critical. They don't like surprises. Assertive firstborns set high goals and have a strong need to be in charge and be noticed. What do you think?
Okay. I think that sounds about right. I mean, I think.
And again, we're not, yeah.
Again, it depends.
Nobody's going to be like a carbon.
No, exactly. It's a bit like horoscopes, really, in a way, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think it's a bit more science to it than that.
Probably is, but there's elements of it, yeah. But I mean, I think it also depends on what age does the second one come along. Because if you have one bang, if you knock them all out quickly, for want of a rather clumsy phrase, then the age difference is it's almost imperceptible. And I think you'll find those children tend to bond between themselves much, much better. 5 years is a lifetime.
They can be really competitive.
Well, there is that, yeah, it is. But the age, but there's also not just the order, but the age gap makes a difference as well, because my oldest brother is 6 years older than me. When I'm 6, he's 12. I'm 12. He's 18. He's driving a car. He's gone. It makes a huge difference. So that makes a difference as well. How big is the difference? Because, as I said, with my younger brother, 10 years, different ball game altogether. So there are so many factors. And of course, then you've got to throw in gender as well about, does the mother or father, does the father is desperate for a boy, how many times have we had, oh God, well, I really, really hope it's a boy, or that I knew that my father wanted a boy rather than a girl. And there are so many factors but order is definitely one of them, without a doubt. And I think an important one.
Gender is a big thing. So you could have, say, 3 girls, and then a much wanted son comes along and is the baby, but is the first son. So we'll have a mixture of being the youngest, but the first son, and vice versa. So some of the, some of the reasons why, and this is why it's really interesting to us. So when we used to work at Focus 12 and you do group therapy, people always would display their like, you can just read people's families from the way people behave, and whether they were the baby or the firstborn, all that kind of stuff. And firstborns can be, they can be quite serious, and they can overwork, and they can get quite stressed, and that can work against you in sobriety. There's just things, it's like back to, I'll be honest with you, I still don't love sharing my things. I don't love it. I do. because that's what builds relationships, and relationships are far more important than my shampoo and conditioner. So we kind of have to be aware of our traits.
Yeah.
Do you?
I hate sharing.
Do you hate people touching your stuff?
Do not touch my stuff. Do not
touch my stuff.
Yeah, I hate it. I find it a
Same
real
here.
intrusive in my privacy. It's like, that's mine. Why are you picking it up? It's got nothing to do with you. Why are you touching it? I get very, very uncomfortable with it. And it's not because I've got something to hide. I've got nothing. I just don't touch my stuff.
Yeah, I want my things to be where I left them. I was talking about this last night at dinner with my husband and my kids, and we were talking about it with my kids about, birth order. And I said, I'm an only child and I don't like people touching my things. And my youngest said, but Mummy, I touch your things all the time. I said, yes, I know. I've got used to it. So we have to be aware of these traits and we have to adapt, but understand why we have them. So let's talk a little bit about the middle child, which is often described as the forgotten, the lost child. You have your moment in the sun for a little bit when you're the youngest, and then you're replaced, and you've got the wonderful firstborn who's winning the awards, getting A's, just doing fabulous, doing everything first, and so everyone's amazed, because they're the first ones doing everything first. And then the baby is just gorgeous. And then there's you just sort of plodding along in the middle.
Yeah.
I mean, I've met lots of only children, and there's definitely traits there. So middle children are often defined by wanting to be deliberately opposite to the child above them. Like they don't. So what can often happen is if you get like a firstborn who's just doing really, really well, gets A's, everything's really easy, good at sport. The only child just is kind of like, I can't compete with that. I'm just gonna, and they can go, not try and not apply themselves. So they can often be natural mediators. And often compromise, and often so this is they're really good at compromise, but sometimes they compromise so much they don't get their needs met. They're compromising, and they get lost. They get lost in the middle. They avoid conflict. They can be independent, very loyal to peers, and usually have lots of friends.
Do you know, the more we do this, as we progress through this podcast... So you're a middle child,
really?
Really, yes, exactly. I was thinking, no wonder I'm messed up. I'm the third child, but I'm not really. I'm the middle child because the second child disappeared when I was 6. So then I became the middle child. And yes, I definitely relate to all those things that you've just listed, at a very crucial age, definitely a mediator, definitely envious of very much a middle child characteristics.
The lost child. The middle child can often be the lost child.
No,
everyone's so busy with the other things going on and other children. Like you're just tick along.
Yeah, and I've sometimes thought to myself, maybe a bit too deeply, but I have thought that my addictive behaviour was a very good way of getting attention, even though I didn't really want it from my parents, or I didn't think I wanted it from my parents. But boy, oh boy, no member of my family, even though I never was at home, I lived in London the whole time, nobody forgot Chip because, what's happened to Chip? Oh, where is he? Is he in jail? Is he doing this? What's he doing? What's he doing? What's he been up to this time? What's he done this time? Nobody forgot Chip, even though I didn't, but I behaved in a way that made sure I wasn't forgotten. I'm not sure whether I consciously was aware of that, but I can see in retrospect there was an element of my behavior which was, you're not going to forget me, guys, because I'm going to be behaving in such an extreme way that you won't be able to forget me. Now, as I said,
there's definitely something to that.
Yeah, there is. No, there is, without any doubt at all. Without any doubt. Yeah,
I mean, I've seen that. I've definitely seen that in clients when you kind of get the family background. It's very subconscious that there is something there about, don't forget me, notice me. I will get your attention. I will get your attention. And so that's all to do with birth order. I will get your attention, good or bad.
Yeah, no,
It doesn't
exactly. And
matter. I just will have
was I
eyes on
conscious
me.
of that? No. Has it been useful for me later on in life to learn that? Yes, it has been, because it does give some explanation as to why I behaved that way. I mean, there were lots of reasons, but I can see
Yeah.
that one benefit I got from behaving the way I did was that no member of my family ever forgot me, which was my deepest issue, which was I thought I had been forgotten and abandoned by my family.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was without
Yeah.
doubt my biggest scar and trauma was being sent away to boarding school just over 6.5, 7, without knowing what was happening and feeling completely abandoned. And oh boy, did I make up for that, you know. As I say, nothing that I would only through, years of training and therapy have I kind of come to that conclusion. Wasn't aware of it at the time, but I can see that there's a valid argument for somebody saying to me,
Yeah.
a lot of your behavior was because of that. And I wouldn't disagree with them. And as you said, I think a lot of people do things subconsciously to make sure that whether they love them or not, they are not forgotten.
Whenever we do a podcast and we talk about your experience as a child, I always get off the podcast and like literally rugby tackle my children to the ground and squeeze them. Because I have a 7-year-old and I'm just like, he's so, my youngest is such a typical youngest. I just want to, I just can picture that.
Yeah. No, whenever I see a 6, in fact, I went to the theatre the other day with Heidi, and I looked at a child we went to a pantomime, saw a Christmas show. And I looked at this child and I said, how old do you think he is? And she said, oh, I don't know, about 6, 7. He was tiny. And I thought, oh my God, you sent that size child away without telling him where he was going.
I know.
Yeah. No, it really got me. It actually got me quite upset.
I mean, really, parents who do that should be sent to prison. It's such abuse.
That would get rid of the British
really
aristocracy.
Well, there we go.
Yeah.
There's a plan.
There's a plan. Yeah.
So we'll talk about the youngest born in a second. But why all of this matters to sobriety is there's no greater influence during your growing up years than your family. The most intimate relationships we have are with our family. And it shapes everything. It shapes, it shapes how we ask for help. It shapes our romantic relationships. The two biggest ways that I feel our family of origin, our experiences as children, the two biggest ways they show up in adulthood are in our relationship with food and in our romantic relationships.
Oh, I will definitely go along with that. I have picked in the past quite controlling women, well, very controlling women, massively controlling women. Heidi can be controlling, but she is aware of it and tempers it, but she tends towards that side of things. But it's controlling in a very caring way, but whereas previous partners have been controlling in a negative way. But definitely that would be a trait of mine to do to that's I can see definitely. Food, I've always been told I eat my food very, very fast. And that is because there was some issues. But I mean, don't forget, I went away to boarding school. So if you didn't eat your food quickly, you were done.
Yeah.
You just...
So my husband, who's a very typical eldest, super responsible, overachieving, all of that kind of stuff. Yeah. And he has a younger brother who is a very typical last born. So my husband is a PhD from Cambridge, proper grown up, like wears suits.
That's very grown up.
When he makes dessert, very grown up, proper grown up person. So he makes desserts like a little boy. He will get a chocolate brownie and there'll be a certain ice cream and then there'll be fudge sauce and then there'll be cherries on it and there'll be his desserts are his thing. He's like a little boy with desserts. They're like this gooey, chocolatey, just tower of ridiculousness. And that is just all a window into his childhood because his mother was an alcoholic. She was often passed out. And so like they fed themselves, and he would make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for him and his brother. So they kind of didn't have anyone supervise. Like, I wouldn't let my kids do that every day because kids can't eat that every day.
Yeah.
But he didn't have a mother saying, you can't have all of that stuff, calm down a bit. They just, and obviously there's a lot of, as children, I think we've used food as comfort as well.
Yes.
So I just find, I've always found that you can see people get the same thing. If you people who come from a large family tend to eat very quickly, because otherwise somebody else would be pinching their sausages or whatever. They just, all of that kind of stuff. So, okay, let's talk about the youngest, the last born. I think that they often can have a stereotype as well, right? The last born, the baby, the cute one, the monkey, the mischievous one.
Yeah. Special. So
lastborns are lastborns are acutely aware that they are the youngest, smallest, weakest, and least equipped to compete in life. So they have to develop other traits because they're not stronger, they can't run faster, they can't figure out the problem quicker. So they have to develop other traits. So they often can be really charming, funny. And it's all about getting our needs met. It's all about getting this attention. And I see that in my youngest. I mean, he's pretty, we're at this, we seem to be in this dynamic where the 11-year-old, they make up games. And amazingly, my eldest son always wins. And then my youngest son has a meltdown. And he's like, I explained the rules. And I'm like, you have to understand, you are faster and smarter and stronger, and you will always have the advantage until you're men, and then you may not have the advantage. And he can't compete, and then he gets really frustrated that that he can't, and they're in that kind of dynamic of trying to figure that out. There's a big desire for attention. I think some of the negative traits are they can often be flaky and manipulative. I see that, again, when it's tidying up time, my eldest does most of it, and my youngest often manages to not do it for some reason or another and get away with it. And I try to be really on top of that because I understand that. I don't want the oldest one to be cleaning up the mess of the younger one. But that can often be a trait of the youngest child, is other people come along and fix it and clean up their messes. And I've seen that a lot in clients as well. And there's a passivity to that.
There is. And funny enough, as you were talking just then, I was thinking one of the things I've often held has been an advantage of being an only child is that you don't have all that sibling rivalry stuff to have to deal with. You're just, yes, there may be some negatives in that, you might get spoiled and the things that we've talked about. But at one level, you don't have that constant kind of, how am I comparing with the other one? How am I doing with the other one? You're just you. So there are some advantages to being an only child, I think. Much more advantages than I think previous kind of family analysts or whatever you call them have given credit to. I think only children have had I think they get a better deal than perhaps we've always thought. But because a lot of my problems came from my brothers, from the way I interacted with them, as we just talked about, being the middle brother or having difficulties or being jealous of the younger one. And and you're right. I do, obviously, with my clients, I do a kind of little genogram usually with each client. And, how do you get on with your sisters? Very few, very, very few say, oh, I get on with them all fine. Some of them say, well, I get on with that one really, really well, but that one can't stand. And actually, I need to probably go back and have a look at them and see what the pattern is between who get on better, the first with the third or the first with the middle. I think it's much more likely that the first and third will get on better than the first and second. But then again, gender plays a part there as well, especially as children start to get a little bit older. Gender starts to play a much bigger role then. Obviously, when you're very young, you're not even aware or notice the difference really. But by the time you're getting to sort of 8, 9, 10, the difference in gender is huge. And that's when I think if you're say a female second child, you could be, and your brother is 4 years older, you could really get a lot of negative stuff coming your way, from boys being boisterous and, just
Yeah.
boys being prats. Boys, sorry. Yeah.
One of the things I've noticed, I mean, again, this is the order that the gender order. Both my boys have always got on really well with girls. They've always had friends who are girls, and typically the ones that they get on the best with are girls who have an older brother, because those girls tend to be into Pokemon and Beyblades and the things that they're into.
Yeah.
Because the girls are what I've noticed is girls who have older brothers are much more tomboy-y and into that kind of stuff than girls who were born first. And that has a real impact on them. And so that's, I've found that really interesting. Because I'm an only child, I've always been fascinated by siblings and sibling relationships.
Yeah.
And in my work as a therapist, I would say that's one of the things that really has hurt my heart the most, is when I have a client who has siblings that they're either at war with or estranged with or hate. I always think that's, for me, I see that as such a massive tragedy and missed opportunity. And I know in some cases there's really good justifiable reasons, but mostly I think that's because of a failure of parenting.
Yeah.
And I've always kind of been really in awe of when I meet people who are really good friends with their siblings, like their siblings are their best mates, and really love and support them. And I think that for me is successful parenting. That's always been my goal with my kids, is their relationship with each other is really important to me. Because they have older parents, so we won't be around as long when they're, well into adulthood. I want their relationship with each other to be really strong. And they have older step siblings. So we had my, for them, it's my stepchildren. It's their half brother and half sister.
Yeah.
So my stepson was here for Christmas with his wife, who they love. And I've want to try and make sure they have a good relationship with them as well. And I find that such a tragedy when, and it's fascinating to me when people are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and the sibling stuff is still playing out as if they were 10.
No, completely.
This one doesn't do this, and this one always, they've always been like that. That's how my brother is. And I'm just like, it's fascinating.
Yeah, but just as we were saying how perhaps maybe the attitude about only children has changed slightly, I think it's such an evolving thing, because also parenting has changed. Anybody who grew up in the 60s onwards has a completely different attitude to parenting. They're much more engaged with their children. The idea of being engaged with your children is not sort of dismissed as being, soppy or stupid, as my parents would have said it was ridiculous to have any sort of thought about considering how your children are, whereas with the Dr. Spock and all those things that came along in the 60s and completely changing the way that parents interacted with their children, that has been I'm 74 now, and I'm just about old enough to kind of be aware of the change, a dramatic change in the way that parents went about parenting, which, they never gave it. I don't think they gave it much thought beforehand. Whereas now people are constantly thinking about it.
There's almost too much thought.
Exactly, where the pendulum has swung from being that sort of Victorian disinterest to now this ridiculous helicopter parenting and wanting everything
over-involved, bulldozering,
which is the pendulum swung too far the other way. So that's a factor that plays into the birth order as well, because, I dare say that it was very stereotypical sort of before anybody born before 1960. But beyond that time, the parenting behavior was changing and evolving, and is continuing to change and evolve. And, I might have a view that with looking at the changing in the way that parenting evolves and the introduction of smartphones and things like that, the whole idea of parenting and childhood experiencing is changing so quickly that it's almost difficult to keep up. These things that we're talking about, these traits that we're talking about, will probably be completely reevaluated in about 5 years' time to take into consideration those children that were born with access to smartphones and without access to smartphones and with access to finding it difficult to express their emotions and things like that. Or just, we've now gone to a situation where parents have, because of things like, I mean, you happen to have touched a particular bee in my bonnet, but because of the way that parents stereotypically now will sit around a table and everybody's on their phone, we're losing that kind of interest in parenting that we used to have in the 70s and 80s and 90s. We're now losing that because we're becoming immersed in our own little world. And so it's changing again.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to kind of take in there. I mean, I'm curious when we post this on social media, what your thoughts are and how you feel your birth order and experiences with or without siblings has affected you. What I want to say is consider it. Some of your personality traits specifically come from your birth order and all the variables. I'll tell you one thing I have got grateful for, though, Chip, is one thing I am noticing as I'm about to turn 50 and get older. I have lots of friends who are, what also happens is when you lose your parents, is I've seen lots of friends and clients have real crap to deal with. All of these decades old resentments are coming out. You know, this person was an executor on the will, this person wasn't, this person got left a picture and this person didn't. And all of these, I've seen a lot of friends and clients really have some stuff to deal with when the last parent died. You know, who cleaned out the house, who didn't clean it, who wants to do a memorial. And I have to say, this is the only one time in my life I am very grateful I'm an only child, that I won't have to deal with any of that. There's just my mum. It's not like there's a massive inheritance or anything, but I won't have to negotiate. Or it's the one time, I only realised this a couple of years ago, that I'm actually quite grateful that I am an only child and I don't have to deal with any of that.
Yeah, no, a huge problem. I mean, I saw my parents, my respectable parents, not so much my parents, but my father had 7 brothers and sisters fighting over furniture. You know, respectable people. No, he left that to me. No, she left that to me. You know, and I think it's caused problems for me within my family when my parents died. And it makes it all the more important. And please write wills, because it does save a lot of people a lot of aggravation and difficulty.
Let's leave it on that. It's really, really important. That's something else I've taken on board is that I want everything to be very transparent between my sons long before either of us transition, because I think I've seen is heartbreaking when siblings who have good relationships get this all kind of falls apart and there's real wounds being made because of stuff that wasn't clear when the last parent died. So having not just a will, but being very transparent and clear and all questions asked before that event, so that your adult kids don't get affected by it. So anyway, we're out of time.
That's an interesting word. Transition.
Yeah.
Is that dying?
We're just transitioning at some point. Yeah.
Transitioning.
You can use that word if you want. Transitioning. Right? Okay, let us know what you think. I'm curious to hear about your experiences in birth order and your relationship with siblings. And I hope to see some of you at the Sobriety Habit Training at the end of January. Go to soberful.com to sign up for that. And we'll see you soon. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.